Welcome to the Business Extra. I'm Mustafa Alrawi, the National's Assistant Editor-in-Chief. Today we're going to talk about the UK and economic sentiment, with a number of risks on the horizon from the Ukrainian conflict, rising prices, energy security, and the political landscape. But before we do that, please do hit that subscribe button or ring that bell. Joining us to talk about the UK and what things are really like on the ground is the National's Chris Blackhurst in the City columnist. That is Chris Blackhurst, of course. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Great. Hi.
Good to talk to you. As I said, there are a number of risks on the horizon. I mean, I wrote a long list of things that are troubling the UK. We've got the Ukraine, of course. Ukraine conflict, of course. We have, energy security, which is an offshoot of that. But then we have rising prices, inflation. Brexit, of course, has never really gone away. We have airport chaos. Even when it's good news and people are coming back to traveling, it's causing, a risk. Northern Ireland, following, recent elections and the political landscape in general, we may have the opposition leader of the opposition resigning over Partygate. You wrote about HSBC and some of the issues that, the biggest bank, UK bank, is having. Also, Chelsea Football Club is currently being sold. That's my laundry list. And you even wrote a few weeks ago about sort of the issue of tax status to do with the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and how that could impact sentiment. So I guess, I'd love to hear from you. Is it that grim right now? Is it that bad?
Well, the short answer is yes, it is. You've used the phrase in your introduction there about risks on the horizon. The truth is, I would actually bring them a bit further forward than that. They're actually with us right now. Our economy was always fragile before Ukraine, and Ukraine is, I hesitate to say pushed it over the edge, but we are definitely, the Bank of England said yesterday, we are heading for recession. The cost of living is soaring. It was going up anyway because of supply line problems, which were are being experienced all over the world because of the pandemic and because of the world coming out of the pandemic. But in our case, we've got the added bonus of problems with Brexit, which still haven't been resolved. So every day there are queues of lorries at Dover trying to get across the English Channel. And the list, as you say, there goes on. And against that as well, to add to the uncertainty, I'm a great believer in you can look at the economy purely by numbers, or you can look at it with numbers, but also looking at the mood of the nation and how people are. And against all that economic woe, we've got some huge uncertainties. We've got a prime minister who's still being investigated by the police. He's already been fined once for holding a party during lockdown. He might get other fines. We've now got a leader of the opposition who's also being investigated, who says that if he is fined, he will resign. Well, obviously that would put pressure back on Boris Johnson. And I think as well, just to add to the sense of uncertainty and fragility is even the sight today of Prince Charles delivering the Queen's speech for the first time ever, because the Queen is too immobile. That said something too. It doesn't lift the mood of the nation. She is the mother of the nation, and she's 96 and clearly very, very frail. So you put all that together, and I don't think we've even mentioned immigrants crossing the Channel. We could be here forever. But saying that, look, I think you start from a point that what's very interesting actually is that only 4 or 5 months ago, the major retailers were all reporting upgrades in their profits. And that was based on them having had a good shopping season at Christmas and New Year, better than expected, the country coming out of pandemic. And so really you have to ask what's changed in that time. And the major change, obviously, is Ukraine. Ukraine has affected everything. Household energy bills and company energy bills are going through the roof as a result. And that's had a profound impact.
So I think if we look at what some of the things you mentioned there, so Prince Charles, handling the Queen's speech, and for the uninitiated, that speech is effectively written by the sitting government, by the the Prime Minister, and one of the major talking points in that speech was the economy, and to a certain extent the government trying to reassure people that they would continue to help, and that continues from the pandemic where the government helped out not only individuals but businesses too, and so now it feels like it's become expected that whatever the crisis is, that the government's gonna step in to help. So that should take some of the edge off, I assume.
To an extent, I think Labour are already, the opposition are already saying it's not enough. I think what's remarkable here, and you've touched upon it rightly, is that this is a Conservative government, and actually was elected really on a fairly libertarian Brexit ticket. Boris Johnson might be in his heart more to the one nation persuasion of the Conservative Party, the more left-wing version of the Conservative Party, but people around him aren't. And yet, quite rightly, as you say, you have a government that stepped in and took initiative after initiative on COVID. We forget there was the cash to eat out, furlough, business loans, short-term business emergency business loans. There was measure after measure, and now here we are again. We've gone from that crisis to this crisis, and they're having to spend money. The problem here is A, it probably isn't enough, and B, in terms of the economy and in terms of the government spending, arguably it's too much because it all has to be paid for. We're already an incredibly high level of tax. Corporation tax is going up again, going up, I think, from 19% to 25%. We're heavily taxed. And the business community, they're not happy at all. And consumers aren't happy. There's been a slowdown in consumer spending. That's been reported in the last 24 hours. First time in 15 months, consumer spending has fallen. And that's very worrying indeed. That's a sign that consumer confidence has taken a real hit. And as I said, only a few months ago, retailers were reporting profits upgrades. They're certainly not doing that now.
Do you think this dip in sentiment, whether it's consumers, business, industry, or otherwise, is for the medium long term, or is it? Do you think it's more short term, related to, for example, if there is a resolution in Ukraine quicker than expected?
It's a very good question. I think that certainly if there was a resolution in Ukraine, it would lift the mood. Hopefully, it would start to push energy bills in the right direction and back down. But there are some deep-seated problems with our economy. It's an imbalanced economy. The most of the wealth is in the southeast. This is a prime minister who says he's going to level up. We don't know how. If he does level up, that would cost a fortune. As I say, Brexit. Brexit is almost forgotten about, really, but it's not for people in business. The people I speak to in business who have to send import and export from the EU, it's a massive headache. And everywhere I live, and in fact everywhere I've been, it's remarkable. I mean, you walk down any British high street and you will see signs everywhere saying staff wanted. We cannot get the staff. You cannot get the staff to work in restaurants, bars, shops. They've all got signs up saying staff wanted. Quite amazing. And these are issues that really don't have anything to do with Ukraine. And certainly Ukraine will be better in the same way that when COVID started, everyone said, well, COVID was exacerbating underlying problems. In a way, that's what's happened with Ukraine. I mean, it's highlighted our lack of energy security. We don't have any. I mean, we are very, very weak in terms of, very reliant on others for our energy. And now they're trying to do something about that. So I think the answer is, I think we're in for, cut to the chase, I think we're in for a very tough 2 years.
And if you mentioned the Southeast, if I talk about London a little bit, because for many people, many of our audience in the Middle East and outside the UK, around the world, they'll know London best. And it seems in the last few weeks, there's been this belief that London has changed. It's changed politically, it's changed economically, for a number of reasons. It's felt very cut off from the rest of the country. And certainly, the idea, a few years ago that it was attracting wealth from all over the world, it doesn't seem quite as open for business as before. But you're there. You're on the ground in the UK. You understand London. You've seen it now. Has London changed that much as we might perceive from the outside if we're just looking at the headlines and the reports?
No, I would say, look, I'm talking to you at my house, but I was in London this morning. London was busy, vibrant, buzzy. There are lots of tourists, not so many foreign tourists, quite a lot, but not in the same numbers we used to have. I don't think anyone visiting London would notice any difference at all. And in fact, you would probably, given that we're coming out of the pandemic, I would say we're more welcoming than ever. You might find the prices a bit higher. Restaurant prices certainly are a bit higher. And there won't be as many restaurants because some closed during COVID, but only the bad ones. No, you wouldn't notice anything. And in terms of welcoming people with wealth and for people to settle, I mean, look, let's be entirely honest here. We're really only talking about some Russians. And really, we're not talking about all Russians. We're talking about a select group of individuals who are very close to Vladimir Putin. And America, New York has exactly the same approach. We are as welcoming as we ever were. In terms of the politics, yes, London is has gone more Labour in the last set of local elections last week than ever. But actually, it's for the last a few decades, it's been a Labour town. You have to remember, I mean, London is it's the biggest city in Europe. It's 8 million people, probably 12 million people further afield in the southeast. That covers all types of people, all types of wealth, poverty, etc. And that's reflected in the voting. You just don't get that anywhere else. No, I think London is. I mean, to be honest, I would say very heavily to your. And I'm not being paid by the tourist board. Now is a very good time to visit. It really is. London's back. The theatres are back. There's crowds. It feels, as I say, it feels dynamic again. I've got no real worries on that score.
So it sounds as if, day to day people are getting on with it, but maybe if they stop to think about,
it's not that bad,
Well, I mean, this is it. I try and understand, because if I only looked at Twitter and I didn't talk to people like you, then I would think, it's a basket case. But I mean, clearly that's not the case. And to cut to the chase, the pound is sliding, and so if you're an investor and you're looking at kind of the UK, or you've been looking at London property for a few years now, you're probably thinking this is a pretty good time to get in, but you might want to know how much worse is it going to get? Is this a bad time to look at it?
Yeah. Well, in answer to the first part, in response to the first part of what you said, is that we are getting on with it, and we also take comfort from the fact that a lot of the problems we're talking about are not just confined to the UK. Some are, but actually, if you look at France, if you look at Italy, certainly in Europe, our neighbours, compared with our neighbours, London, UK is in not bad shape. It's no worse than they are. It really isn't. And by the way, as a nation, we do like to talk things down. It's part of our. I don't know. We just love a good moan, and we do it very well. In terms of property and investing, certainly the Nationwide, which is one of our biggest property lenders, they survey regularly, and their most recent survey suggests that the market might be spiking. Saying that, I don't know. I mean, property is going. Property is changing hands. Even the very, very biggest central London mansions are changing hands. I mean, I heard one that went for, I think it was £20 million last week. People are still coming in. Lots of interest from the Middle East. Lots of interest from Asia, from India, even South America. As I say, I mean, the only place where there isn't that huge amount of interest is Russia. But the rest is, London is still one of the major cities in the world. The UK is, when I last looked, it might have slipped a bit, but when I last looked, I think we're the fifth biggest economy in the world. We were fifth or sixth. We look slightly blurred as to which one we are. But boy, being the fifth biggest economy in the world, that's not a bad place to be.
No, I agree with you. And even Ukraine conflict. I mean, if you look at Britain's role within NATO, and also in terms of supporting Ukraine, and what Boris Johnson's been saying, the Prime Minister, day in, day out, that's kind of really flipped on its head some of the kind of negativity around what Brexit meant for Britain's standing. So things move on, and I have to say that from the outside, you have to still say that Britain's a superpower. Despite everything we've listed, despite my shopping list.
That's very kind of you. I'm not sure. I've not really ever heard us described as a superpower, but we're up there. I mean, we're up there. But look. Ukraine is a tragedy. There's no doubt about that. But it has had some advantages. It's had some knock-on benefits. It's given NATO a sense of purpose, which we can now all see. I mean, we've spent the last few years longer arguing about what NATO's for. Britain has been able to take a foreign policy lead without the cumbrance of Brussels. We can do our own thing. We've been doing our own thing. I think I'm right in saying I don't think any other EU leader, maybe Poland, but I don't think Macron. I don't think any of them have been to Kiev. Boris went to Kiev. The phrase we use, I suppose, and again, it's us talking ourselves down, is we've probably punched above our weight a bit where Ukraine's concerned. But saying that, I think we have got the weight. We are. We've shown on the world stage we are respected. Boris has his. I mean, you never know where you are with Boris. You don't know if he's going to put his foot in it 1 minute and say something terrible. But on Ukraine, he's done a good job. And the EU, the EU has structural problems and issues. I mean, there are some profound issues for Europe about Ukraine. Does Ukraine join NATO? Does Ukraine join the EU? Well, the answer to both of those, if we don't want to inflame Russia anymore, has got to be no and no. I think the Ukrainians accept that, but there is the pressure to use those two bodies to embrace Ukraine is very high. So there's some big structural issues for Europe to face. And Britain isn't badly, we're on the edge of that. And things in that regard have gone a bit better.
Chris Blackhurst, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for being with us. You can read the Chris Blackhurst in the City column at thenationalnews.com.
Thanks.
That's it for today. All that remains to thank our production team and you all for joining us.